So, car insurance laws can be pretty ruthless, and if you're caught doing the wrong thing, it could cost you tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, let's talk about what would happen if you got into a car accident and you didn't have insurance. Now, in this scenario, we're going to assume that you haven't had insurance. Financially, according to the national average from 2020, and probably 2021 is similar, and 2022 even, it really hasn't changed a whole lot. You're about $4,000 to $5,000 is the average property damage that an accident causes. So if you hit a car, it's a good chance that there's instantly a $5,000 payout that you now owe. It's just something that you have to go after. They're going to go after you if you don't pay that. You damage someone's car, it's your fault, you're liable, so on and so forth. Now that doesn't include your own vehicle, so you pretty much can double that. So you have $5,000 for your car, or whatever your car is worth. You've got about $5,000 for the other person's car. If somebody's injured, the actual average for an injury is about $23,000 to $24,000 worth of medical. Same scenario, you've got 5,000 plus 25 will make it easy. So now you have about a $30,000 bill that you have to pay back. It's kind of like getting a trailer mobile home or whatever you want to call it for the next 20 years to 30 years, where you're now paying a $800 to $1,000 bill for the next couple decades. Now, that doesn't even begin to start what the penalties are going to happen. So there's a few things that the state is going to do to step in and reprimand you for not having insurance. First thing, if the car isn't registered, it's going to be towed. The actual registration to the vehicle, if it is registered, will likely get suspended. So that registration will go away. You're probably going to have to re-register the vehicle. So there's an additional cost if you figure you pay a few $100s to register a vehicle in most states. Some are less, some are more. And you're going to have that again on top of the plate and the fees and anything else that the impound lot has gotten. So we're probably adding an additional $500 to $1,000 cost on that additional piece. There are going to be fines, 100%. It's going to happen. And that comes with getting your license suspended. Almost every single state will suspend your license if you're caught without insurance. Some will suspend it temporarily, let you prove that you've had insurance. If you can't prove it, then they may allow you to go into like a payment system to where you are on what's called an SR22, which we'll get into in a second. But that essentially is going to have those fines and those fees attached to that suspension. If you can't pay all of your fines and all of your fees and all of your backdated amounts, then you just won't get your license back. The state is very clear on those to when you have a suspended license, you don't get it returned until something happens. Could you still insure the vehicle? Yes, technically. You can buy an insurance policy and have a driver where you're not the driver. You can be a primary policy holder because you own the vehicle. You're the registered owner. And then you could have a secondary driver or a main driver that would drive you around. Keep in mind, if you decide to drive one day, these fines can almost double on you. Now, part of these articles, if you read them, I read Credible, Value Penguin, Bankrate, and Policy Genius. All of them had something to say on this. And they are a little bit wrong when they say this. They always say that you're going to be high-risk insurance and you're going to have a required high-risk insurance. They're half right and half wrong. What they mean by that is you're actually called an SR22. It's no different like if you filed your taxes a 1040 or whatever you file a W-2, whatever that case is. It's the same thing with insurance. There's paperwork you have to file to prove to the state that you have insurance. It's basically a direct connection with the government and the state, Secretary of State, or whatever you have at your state that says if my insurance lapses, then I instantly am notifying the state that I don't have insurance. They're going to suspend my license within a day to a couple hours. Sometimes it takes a couple weeks, but if I don't prove that I have insurance right away, that is breaking my guide. I've already broken the rules once. They're not going to let me break it again. They're just going to remove my license. I've had several clients where they just found out they had no license by driving. If they owed money for any particular reason, then that's where that SR22 comes into play. That's part of why they say it's high risk. But what most of these articles are talking about is that high risk insurance. Yes, you're going to be a high risk because of not having insurance. Your driving without insurance is actually a penalty. Some companies actually don't care as much as you would think about that situation. If you can explain it, and a lot of people have different reasons. They didn't have insurance because the vehicle was inoperable, or they didn't have insurance and they just drove anyways. That's actually one of the answers in some of these companies. I've written several policies where we have notated that they were driving just without insurance. And the rate wasn't ridiculously high. It just was a little bit more expensive. Keep in mind, most companies will double the rate or give a 30-40% increase because of those scenarios. They want you to have insurance. But more of the penalty isn't so much of the driving without insurance. Sure, it shows some irresponsibility on your part, but it is more so the fact that you don't have insurance. That's actually kind of a discount. If you've had 6 months of insurance, that shows the responsibility and the longevity of having a policy. Whenever you shop a policy, and if you don't have 6 months of prior insurance, the rate tends to be more expensive automatically. So part of it is because of you not having insurance and getting in an accident. The other part is just not having insurance for 6 months. That accident is going to play a factor. If it is your fault, you've now got high risk, you don't have insurance, you haven't had insurance for 6 months, and you have an at-fault claim and likely a ticket. Most cases, the ticket or the claim are one together. So when you have this show up on your driving history, they're only going to count one of the two. That means they're going to count the worst of the two. If it was an at-fault claim, they're going to count that. If it was a DUI, they're probably going to count that and remove the claim. It doesn't matter. It's going to show up either way, but in most companies in most states, they don't count both of them against you. That's not to say that you're not going to get criminal charges, because the state, and this isn't even insurance, this is just the state, is requiring you to have a policy. And if you were caught without insurance and actually hurt someone and have a major claim and it's your fault, the state could actually file criminal charges. They usually don't unless somebody's majorly injured or if you were drinking. If that's the case, then you're going to get a lot of stuff with that. You're talking anywhere from $3,000 to an extra $20,000 in fees and courts and lawyers and all of that stuff. That's a totally different video, and I actually have a video for that if you want to get a little bit more in depth on DUIs and OWIs and all of those scenarios. The criminal charges typically come if you've had more than one occurrence. So if you've lost your license twice or 3 times, there's different strikes that they give you and penalties that the state's going to give you based on your criminal activity, because it technically is starting to become criminal that you're purposely risking that when it's required by law. I get it. A lot of people think insurance shouldn't be required, and in some scenarios, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. There's some states that don't require it. You can get surety bonds and different things. I think there's only 2 states. I want to say Virginia and New Hampshire are the 2 states that don't require it, but there's other requirements that you have to meet, and it's technically self-insurance. You're paying a bond. You're putting money in an account to say if I get in an accident, this will pay towards it, and I owe anything else besides that. So you're kind of defaulting to the average. Those are just the fines and the technicalities for you. The other piece that you're not thinking of and you want to be careful about is how much damage did I actually cause? If you damage a person's car, if you hurt multiple people in the accident, there's those legal fees that we talked about, the suspension of the license, the fines, the potential time that it's going to take away from work. You got to go to court. You got to figure this out. It's not on your time. They schedule this for you, and you've just got to show up. You might have to go through counseling depending on the situation. But there are a couple scenarios where it actually doesn't hurt you as bad. So in certain states, they're no-fault states where everybody takes care of their own. You're still actually on the hook, because what typically happens is that person goes and fixes their car, claims their medical on their own policy. They're taken care of. You still owe that to the insurance company, because the insurance company pays it and then comes back and gets the other insurance company to pay them back. In this scenario, there is no insurance company. There's you, and you are going to be the one that's going to show up in court with the filed lawsuit against that insurance company. For example, in the state of Michigan, it's a misdemeanor, and you're up to a $500 fine if you are in an accident where you weren't at fault. The state of Michigan is typically going to pick up the medical if you don't have your own medical and you're not on a policy. There are some ins and outs and gray areas that I'll asterisk this because it's not a perfect scenario that we're specifically talking about, but that's typically how a lot of states are going to handle that. Not all states are really tight and really aggressive with that. Some states give you a 30-day suspension, and once 30 days is up, you get your license back, you can go get insurance again, you can get the car re-registered, you can start driving. You pay some small fines and you're okay. You're probably going to pay $1,000 to $2,000 out of pocket, but you're still on the hook for all of the things that have happened. So I'm sure you're asking what the next question is how much is a license reinstatement? A license reinstatement isn't that expensive. You're anywhere from $100 to the $500 range. For example, Florida, I think, is $120 or $150 to reinstate your license, where, like we just said, Michigan is that $150 on up. You're closer to that extra cost. That's not including any fines that you have for court. It's not including hiring a lawyer. That's not including any impound fees that you may have incurred. That's just to get your license checked off that you're allowed to drive again. Like we said, Michigan is close to that $200 range. Texas is close to that $200 to $500 as well. There's a lot of different states that have different rules. You can just go to the government's website, type in suspension or reinstatement fee, and you can usually just pull it right up off of their cert. If you are driving because you just can't afford the insurance, that's one of those scenarios where it's tough. I get it. It's something that in some areas, the prices are just out of this world. It really just starts with you having to sit down and shop. If you can't carry the full coverage, if you can't carry the higher liability limits, if you can't do and afford the level that you need, there are different companies that offer different prices. There's a lot of higher risk, and that sounds like it's pricey, but it's not always that expensive. For those that have higher risk or have higher rates, it's usually the area that you're in, not necessarily you. A lot of times it's a mix. Your profile is built between you, your insurance score, your location, the theft on your vehicle, the repairs on your vehicle, the area that you're in, how many claims that company has. And with those higher risk companies, what they'll typically do is they're competitive there. They actually thrive in that situation, so their rates are going to be less expensive. Your higher end companies or your larger companies are going to be a lot more expensive because that's not their focus. They don't want that type of business mixed with what they're going after. It's not that they're a bad company, it's just not the profile that they want. The funny thing is they actually usually have a high-risk department. So if you know anyone that is driving without insurance, share this video with them, let them know the risks so that they can make a good determination of what they're risking and where they should go. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.